Did Meta launch Threads too soon? This is MacVoices. Today's edition of MacVoices is supported by MacVoices Featured Gear, like the OWC Thunderbolt Hub. No matter which Mac you have, you can always use more connectivity, and the OWC Thunderbolt Hub delivers. Visit macvoices.com/featured gear and do more with your tech. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. The MacVoices Live panel continues its discussion of social media in general and Threads in particular, as we examine what features are necessary to make a social network potentially successful. Let's go back and let the panel do the talking. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that the analysts will be happy to tell us whether Apple was successful or not, right behind the tech journalists.
Yeah,
but,
if they're expecting 2-year upgrade cycle level sales, they might not get there, or it might be flat, which would still be a highly successful quarter, but maybe not what they're expecting on the outside.
Well, but like Eric was saying earlier, even if you don't get the upgrades of the phones, there's still the opportunity there for a revenue stream with Apple Care. Not to mention the services supporting the phone, whether it's 15, 14, 13, 12. How far back does it go now? 9? I think.
On the supported list?
Yeah, I think they dropped the 8, but the 9 I think is still there.
There was never a 9. It went from 8 to 10.
Well, that's right. Yeah, but the point that's why there's no 9 on the list. But the point is that there's still, those phones still generate revenue for Apple at one level or another, for one reason or another. So, especially
on the service side of the equation, those batteries are shot, people go in and have the batteries replaced. So just things like that too.
Yeah. There's one other thing that I wanted to bring up. I'm sorry Jeff's not here tonight because I was thinking of him. So how about a show of hands here? And folks, I did not prepare the panel for this, so this is cold. How many people here are on Threads? Okay, some of us, not everybody. So Jeff had commented a number of times as we were discussing Threads about them bringing out Threads as a minimum viable product. And in the last week, 2 weeks, because we had that 1 week, there's been a lot of discussion about Threads losing engagement and people not being as engaged. And it got me to thinking about what is a minimum viable product. And if we put Threads under the microscope, we've had some discussions about there was no web interface. There are a number of features missing that you would have thought would have been almost brain dead simple to put on the required list, and yet they brought it out. We know they brought it out because Twitter was on the ropes, or X, or whatever. But did they do themselves a disservice? Does anyone think by bringing it out? And yeah, they captured names and they captured user numbers, but they haven't captured engagement.
I think it's still way too early to say.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
So
it's too early.
Yeah, it got a lot of attention right up front when it was first introduced. People who are tied in with Meta and Facebook and Instagram, they go ahead and get it. Go ahead and download it and try it. But I still think it's still in its shakeout phase.
Yeah. I mean, the search is not there. It doesn't have hashtag support yet, which is crucial for search. You don't have for businesses, you don't have integration with Meta's business tools yet. I mean, it's still basically an alpha.
Okay, but in our culture where it's we hit things and then move past them so fast, What's it going to take to pull people back to threads if they didn't have a positive experience the first time? How are you going to get? Because Web, I'm with you. They generate a lot of excitement, and they got a lot of users
Press.
on the rolls and press. Yeah,
A lot of attention. Yeah.
but then how do you get them back?
X/Twitter screwing up.
That's not going to happen.
Ben, is that adequate? I mean, look, yeah, we don't want to pick on anybody here, but we've all, in fact, last week, if you didn't stay for After Dark, the whole panel pretty much joined Spoutable because somebody suggested it. And it's been interesting because Spoutable has its own quirkiness, but it's a lot more fully featured than Threads is right now. Odds are you probably have never heard of Spoutable until I just said it, which is too bad. You've heard us talk about T2. You've heard us talk about Blue Sky. Same thing. The engagement levels there aren't what they are on Mastodon, or at least for me, still on Twitter.
But I would say Threads,
X.
Threads is considerably higher than any other Twitter replacement overall. I mean, you might not see the high engagement that you do on Mastodon, but Mastodon is also, it is very niche in its audience.
I wonder if they include some celebrity endorsements or particular news agencies that decide to promote themselves on Threads, or maybe like exclusive. I don't know. Like, how X does those live. They do shows. I don't know what their use of the name is. They're like live YouTubes on X. I wonder if they had a couple of those that brought in a large audience. You had to be a member you had to have an account in order to view it. So maybe stuff like that might attract some people.
Well, let's see.
I mean,
it's been probably a couple months, I guess, when we had the discussion about Apple TV's Silo having an episode there. And that seemed to freak a lot on X, and that seemed to freak a lot of people out. So, but it generated attention for X, right, wrong, or indifferent. And I'm kind of struggling with the news outlets looking to Threads, given the battle royale that Facebook has been having with the news outlets all over.
It's true.
So, listen, I don't know. I'm asking a question. I just wonder. My whole premise to this became, in spite of what was going on with X, I got it right that time. In spite of what was going on with X, did Threads launch too quick?
Well, for sporting events, they always say, there's a reason why we play the game. Yeah. We'll find out. This is real life, and they made a call. Who knows?
Eric, you've been sitting there looking very thoughtful, you and your grapes.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things occur to me. One is Mastodon came out, and a few people joined it, and it was years. And then all of a sudden something happened and people needed a place to go, and Mastodon got slammed with users. And it peaked, and then people couldn't get on to servers, and it dropped a little bit, and then it peaked again, and it dropped a little, and it peaked again, and it dropped a little. But the one consistency all the way through is Mastodon always had people generating content. I've seen some posts from Blue Sky people handing out invites to Blue Sky on Mastodon to people that produce content So I don't know if they're just trying to get more content on Blue Sky and then sort of slowly build it up. I'm not seeing anybody from Threads wandering through Mastodon looking for content, trying to get people to move. So maybe that's not what they're worried about. They certainly have captured lots of accounts that aren't active, but then Mastodon did that for a while too. And it wasn't until later, I mean, sometimes it was like a year or two later that people said, oh, yeah, that's right. I had an account there, but I didn't feel a need to move. And then all of a sudden I had to move. And I went to someplace where I had an account. So just being there with accounts, I think, is helpful. But at some point, it's going to come down to content. And because there's a certain number of people that the way they develop their accounts is to look at the content that's being produced, aggregate it for their own users, and then kind of redistribute it, repackage it for whoever is following them. And Mastodon's got 5 or 6 really well-known aggregators, but there's the content to aggregate. I don't know if Threads has that yet. Blue Sky, there are hints of it. Spoutable, it's just too early. I'm not sure yet. So there's a progression. It's, as people have already said, it's a little too early to tell. But I look for content to come through. I look for aggregators to kind of republish that content, and then have people following that, and while they're following it, have their own private conversations. So there's several layers that have to occur to have a vibrant community. It's not quite there yet. That doesn't mean it can't show up. So as you said, we'll have to wait and see.
Today's edition of Mac Voices is supported by MacVoices Featured Gear, like the OWC Thunderbolt Hub. No matter which Mac you have, you can always use more connectivity, and the OWC Thunderbolt Hub delivers with 3 Thunderbolt 4 ports that are USB-C compatible and a USB-A port that is USB 3.2 Gen 2 compatible. The hub delivers 60 watts of charging power, and because it's externally powered, doesn't compromise on performance. Find the links at macvoices.com/featured gear.
I'll go back to Threads a little bit. It was interesting. I looked at it the other day, and we knew how Instagram obviously fed to Threads, and most people who were on Instagram then would obviously subscribe to Threads. I looked at my friends list, and I probably have about 1,000 or so followers on Instagram. Not even 20 or 30% of them have actually come over to Threads. I went through my list the other day, and I'm like, wow, there's a lot of people who have not even taken the time to even try it out. So it kind of stalled, like you've been talking about here. Is it was going crazy at the very beginning, but it's kind of tailed off. So a lot of people who are on Instagram are just fine being on Instagram, and then they just aren't bothering with it.
Do you think that we're going to get into a feature race here pretty soon with all these non-Twitter, non-X platforms? Mastodon needs to throw in some features, or the other ones, Threads or whoever. Are we going to get into a feature race here pretty soon? See who comes out on top?
Oh, that's an interesting question, Webb, because at some point you say, okay, what features are make or break features? Ben pointed out hashtags, which would definitely seem to be one. I don't know if video is. I know that for those of you that follow me on any of social medias, whenever I announce like a Mac Voices live panel, I try to make sure I tag everybody in the panel so that they know and also their followers know. And on Twitter, I can do that. Twitter X, whatever. I can do that. No problem. I can do it. In fact, I can do it on pretty much every platform except Blue Sky. Blue Sky does not give me enough letters in the tweet or in the, what do you call it? I don't know what they do in
the field.
In the field. Well, they don't give me enough enough text spaces to include everybody's identity. If I remember correctly, X decided long before Elon became involved that it was either URLs didn't count or ads didn't count. So if I added Web Bixby, it didn't count toward my X number of characters. Right. So Blue Sky is hampering things a little bit there, at least for me, with what I try to post and the information I try to provide. So the feature question is a good one, Web. Yep. Ben, what other features would you consider essential for a successful social network?
Well, I don't know about a social network, but for one that is from Meta, cross-posting from Facebook and Instagram to maximize user reach would definitely be one of them.
Been doing.
But I think to be successful, I mean, number one, you have to define success. I mean, Mastodon within its specific niches has been highly successful. But there are also a lot of user niches that aren't anywhere near Mastodon, where Threads doesn't have the engagement right now. But, I mean, you have the sports niches, you have news niches, you have a little slice of everything, which is how Twitter, now X, was able to get its position.
Eric, critical feature?
I've got two of them. One is being able to edit posts as well as alt tags. Not everybody lets you do it, or you can edit the post, but you can't edit your alt tag. There are a whole lot of people that have gotten used to posting something right away while they've got the picture and the text in mind, and they go back later and add the alt tags or make them more complete. So when you can't do that, people just stop posting on that platform because they can't finish their thought. And then, the second one is gone. Don't know, but there was another one there. It'll come back.
I wonder if Threads is still going to federate. That could certainly change the trajectory of something.
No, I don't think I even knew they were thinking about federating.
Oh yeah, they were all ahead of time. That was like, it's going to be, it uses activity pub. It's going to federate. And then there was this whole, on Mastodon, there was this whole thing of people saying, we don't want Mastodon hosts to federate with it. Like before it was even announced, and there was this whole big controversy.
I missed that completely, or I forgot about one of the two.
Probably for the best, because it hasn't happened. So, kind of a silly controversy, I thought.
Mm-hmm. Brian?
Well, I thought, and not necessarily well developed, but just something that occurred to me. It's like, I wonder if you're starting to see the social media maturing a bit, where when you think about media and consuming media of not social sources, but just various news sources, print publications, web blogs of that nature, we consume so many different types, so many different areas on a daily basis, and we consume more than just one. We're informed in many different areas, and maybe this is just the maturing of social media, where where there doesn't need to just be the one or two dominant places that we're visiting, but each one kind of has its own flavor and style. And while there's a lot of similarities between them, just as there is different, I guess you'd say, protocols and things of that nature that you would get on traditional sources of media, maybe this is just that type of variation for it.
There's also a lot of other, stuff that isn't normally lumped under social media, but I think kind of is part of it, like Discords and Slacks and forums. and stuff like that. I'd also say, it's like you talk about, well, it doesn't, keep saying it doesn't have the reach of Twitter. Well, if you go back 2 years ago, who was on, most people were never on Twitter and have never been on Twitter or any of those things. And even 2 years ago, like in the real world, if you met people, it's like, are you on Twitter? And they'd either be, huh? Or, why are you wasting your time on that, on that piece of junk? I think, probably maybe 2 or 3% of the population ever was on Twitter. And, that's only gone down. So, I'm not sure where I'm getting at, except that, Twitter was never this huge success of, all encompassing, it hasn't made much money ever. And again, now it's losing more money. Who knows where this is going to go, but I think it's all in flux.
Matthew in the chat room points out that he thinks a lot of people found out that if they didn't like Threads and you tried to close it, it will close out your entire Instagram account.
Right.
Maybe Meta has changed that, but he didn't want to take the risk, even if it was false. And I don't think they've changed that.
No, they haven't changed.
No.
You have to use your Instagram account to sign into Threads.
So I don't know, Matthew. I think you make some really good points that maybe that's one reason that the accounts are still sticking around, that people just didn't delete them outright. Webb, sorry, I interrupted.
No, I was just going to say, Jim, I agree with you. And Kelly Guimont brought that a similar point that you brought up 3-4 months ago, maybe. Twitter was popular, but it wasn't dominant. Kelly brought up the number of users on Twitter versus number of users on Facebook, and it was like tenfold difference. Facebook had way more users than Twitter did. So, and Twitter's had an interesting, business case, and I've talked about that on the show for ages. They're not making money. They haven't monetized very well. Now you don't want to be a landlord with X as a tenant because you're not getting paid rent either. So it's an interesting business model, and you're right. It was never the financial powerhouse that everyone thinks it was.
Is that because of the nature of the network, or is that because of the management?
Yeah, it's a Forrest Gump response, a little bit of both. There's certain things that the management, current or even previous, the original management, probably didn't do well. But I also think that they never thought about when they put this thing together that how it was going to be designed to make a lot of money. They never really figured out a way to monetize it very well. When they did try to, then they got a lot of pushback from the users. So and just it's an interesting case.
You mean kind of like the pushback we're seeing now with Elon trying to charge for the check marks and all?
Yeah, but you can even go back to what was the two founders' names? That they had their own struggles with
Evan Stone, wasn't it?
Stone, yeah,
and Dorsey.
Jack Dorsey, yeah. They stubbed their toe a couple of times too in the process. First of all, it got to be more popular than they expected, and we brought the phrase fail whale to our vocabulary when Twitter was just getting overrun by users logging in, and they learned how to scale that up eventually. But for the first couple of years, it was a problem, and they probably spent a lot of money to get up to scale, and they're still paying for that too. So, yeah, I'm guessing.
Believe it or not, the MacVoices panel had even more to say about social media and the feature sets of each network that are important to them and why. So the discussion went a little extra long, and that's why we're going to conclude it in the next edition of Mac Voices. I hope you'll join us. Until then, I'm Chuck Joyner. As always, thanks for watching.
Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with Mac Voices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.